My name is Evelyn Carter, and I was 31 years old when I finally understood how easy it was for my family to imagine life without me as long as everything was still paid for. I've always been the dependable one, the oldest child, the one who remembers birthdays without reminders, who answers calls no matter the hour, who quietly transfers money when someone is short and pretends it's no big deal. I work in IT. Nothing glamorous, but stable, predictable, well paid enough that emergencies don't scare me anymore. That stability became my identity. Calm Evelyn, reliable Evelyn, the one who doesn't make things harder. My younger brother Marcus is 3 years younger than me and has always existed at the emotional center of our family. He's expressive, reactive, easily overwhelmed, and somehow that has always translated into everyone adjusting around him. If Marcus was stressed, plans changed. If Marcus felt uncomfortable, compromises were made. If I felt overlooked, I was told I was strong enough to handle it. I handled it for years. The idea for the vacation came to me late one night after a week that had drained me more than usual. I was alone in my apartment scrolling through old family photos, holidays, where we were smiling for real, not performing politeness. Somewhere along the way, everything had become tense, competitive, careful. I told myself maybe we just needed a reset, something neutral, something generous, something no one could criticize. So I booked it. 5 days at a beachside resort. Separate rooms. Flights, transfers, hotel, everything prepaid. I spent more on that trip than I ever had on myself, but I convinced myself it was an investment, a way back to each other. I announced it casually at dinner at my parents' house. No build-up, no expectations. I just said I booked us a trip next month. All of us. My mom teared up immediately. My dad looked genuinely proud. Marcus started talking about the ocean like he'd already packed. Then he smiled at me and said, "Wow, that's generous." Not grateful, not excited, generous. That word stayed with me longer than it should have. In the weeks that followed, I handled every detail. Sent itineraries, asked for preferences, coordinated flights. Marcus had opinions about everything: room size, quiet mornings, restaurant reservations. I adjusted without thinking. Old habits don't announce themselves when they're happening. A few days before the trip, the energy shifted. Group chats went quiet, messages sat unread. Then my mom called, her voice careful in a way that immediately tightened my chest. "Did you and Marcus have a disagreement?" she asked. I laughed because it sounded absurd. "No." "Why?" She hesitated. "He said you talked, that you agreed it might be better if you didn't come." I felt the words before I understood them. "I paid for the trip," I said slowly, "including my own ticket." There was a pause. Then she said, "He told everyone you uninvited yourself, said you were stressed and wanted space." That was when something dropped in my stomach, heavy, cold, unmistakable. I hung up and called Marcus. No answer. I didn't text. I opened social media instead, half hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. A photo of a suitcase on his bed. Caption: family vacation. Smaller group this time. Finally some peace. Smaller group. I sat there staring at my phone, replaying every comment from the past week. The way he'd asked if I really needed to come. The laugh when I said I was looking forward to it. The assumption threaded through all of it. He hadn't misunderstood me. He'd replaced me. That night, a message finally came through from Marcus. "I didn't mean it in a bad way. I just really need space on this trip. You understand, right?" "You always do." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the airline app. 5 tickets, 5 names, all refundable individually. For the first time, I wasn't pretending I didn't see the choice in front of me. And when my phone started buzzing again, missed calls, confused messages, cracks forming in the story he'd told, I realized something quietly terrifying. I didn't feel the urge to fix it. By morning, the situation felt unreal, like I was watching my own life play out behind frosted glass. My phone was heavy in my hand before I even unlocked it. Missed calls from my mother, 2 from my father, a message from Marcus that simply said, "We need to talk." That sentence used to make my chest tighten with urgency. Now it just sat there flat and strangely distant. I didn't call anyone back right away. I made coffee instead, poured it into my favorite mug, then forgot about it completely as I opened the family group chat. Marcus had been active while I slept. He hadn't mentioned me by name, but he didn't need to. He'd written a long message about how this trip was supposed to be healing for him, how he'd been overwhelmed lately, how important boundaries were. He ended it with a heart emoji and a thank you to everyone for being understanding of his needs. My mother responded with reassurance. My father sent a thumbs up. No one asked where I fit into any of it. No one asked me anything at all. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I needed defending, but because it showed how easily my absence could be accepted if it made things simpler. I had paid for everything: flights, rooms, transfers, and yet within hours the narrative had shifted so smoothly that I was no longer the reason the trip existed. I was an inconvenience that had thoughtfully removed herself. When I finally called my dad, he answered immediately, like he'd been waiting. His voice was low, already tired. "Evelyn." He said this got a little out of hand. "That depends on who you ask," I replied. He sighed and went straight to the familiar script. Marcus had been under a lot of stress. He hadn't meant anything by it. He thought I'd be okay with stepping back. I asked him directly if he knew I hadn't agreed to that. The pause that followed told me everything before he even spoke. He said, "You talked," my dad admitted. Said you understood. "And you didn't think to check with me?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. I didn't want to stir things up. There it was, laid bare. Don't stir things up. Let Marcus set the tone. Let Evelyn absorb the inconvenience. My mom called next. Her voice was soft, careful, the way it always was when she wanted something from me. She said Marcus hadn't meant to hurt me, that he was anxious, that family vacations were hard for him, that maybe it would be good for me to take a break anyway. Take a break from what I asked quietly. My own life. Over the next 2 days, the pressure came in waves. Subtle at first. My brother texting like nothing was wrong. My mom asking if I'd packed yet, then correcting herself with an awkward laugh. Marcus didn't reach out directly again, but he didn't have to. He let everyone else smooth it over for him, reframing and minimizing until the lie felt almost reasonable. The day before the trip, my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. She sat at my kitchen table, hands folded, eyes scanning the room like she was assessing my emotional stability. "He's just asking for this one thing," she said. "He needs to feel comfortable." "I need to feel respected," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "He didn't ask me. He told people I wasn't coming. He decided for me." She nodded, but it was the kind of nod that acknowledged my feelings without agreeing with them. "You know how he is." That sentence had followed me my entire life. It excused everything. That night, Marcus finally called. Not to apologize, not to explain, to negotiate. His voice was tight, already irritated that I hadn't gone along with it. He talked about room layouts, about dynamics, about how my presence changed things. "You're always so independent," he said. "I figured you wouldn't mind sitting this one out." I asked him why he hadn't talked to me first. He laughed short and dismissive. "Because I knew you'd overthink it." Something inside me settled then. Not snapped, not exploded, just hardened into clarity. I told him I hadn't canceled anything yet. His tone shifted immediately, sharp and defensive. He accused me of holding money over everyone's head, of turning a gift into leverage. "You always do this," he said. "You act generous and then make it about control." I hung up before he could finish. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was angry, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying moments from the past that suddenly made sense. Times Marcus had volunteered me for things without asking. Times plans had changed last minute because he needed something different. Times I'd been told to let it go because I was easier. By morning, the trip was less than 24 hours away. I opened the airline app again. I read the refund policies. I looked at the names. I didn't select anything yet, but I could feel myself inching toward a line I'd never crossed before. Then my younger cousin called. "Marcus says if you show up, he's not going," she said, awkward and clearly uncomfortable being in the middle. "He's free to make that choice," I replied. She hesitated. "Mom's really upset." Of course she was. By now the narrative was complete. Marcus was fragile. I was disruptive. The problem wasn't the lie. It wasn't the entitlement. It was that I wasn't quietly disappearing. That afternoon, my dad suggested a group call. No surprises, he said, which already felt like one. Marcus dominated the conversation, talking about his anxiety about needing space, about how he'd assumed I wouldn't want to come because I never really relaxed. At one point, he said something that made my stomach drop. "Let's be honest," he said casually. "This trip wasn't really for Evelyn anyway. She just booked it." No one contradicted him. My mom cleared her throat. My dad changed the subject. The silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. In that moment, I understood that even if I went on that vacation, I would be a guest in my own generosity, a tolerated presence. And Marcus knew it. He'd counted on it. After the call ended, a private message came through from him almost immediately. If you care about this family, you'll do the right thing and stay home. I stared at the words until they blurred. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I opened the app again, my heart steady in a way that surprised me. And this time I made a choice. I didn't feel dramatic when I finally tapped the screen. There was no rush of adrenaline, no satisfaction, no sense of victory. Just a quiet click, a brief loading icon, and then confirmation. I hadn't canceled my ticket. I hadn't touched my parents. I canceled one ticket, the one belonging to the person who had already decided I didn't belong. The app didn't ask me why. It didn't question my intent. It simply acknowledged that the purchaser had made a change. And in that moment, I realized how rarely anyone had ever accepted my decisions without debate. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Not a single call from Marcus, not at first. The calls came from everywhere else, like ripples spreading outward from a stone I hadn't meant to throw, but didn't regret letting sink. My mom called twice. My dad once. A cousin texted asking what was going on. I didn't answer. Not because I was trying to punish anyone, but because for the first time I wasn't rushing to explain myself before someone else could explain me wrong. The silence afterward was heavier than I expected. I sat on the edge of my couch phone, resting in my palm, half expecting it to undo itself to flash some error message that said this wasn't allowed, that I'd crossed an invisible line I wasn't meant to see. Nothing happened. The confirmation email stayed put. Reality didn't blink. I went to work that day on autopilot, fixed a server issue, answered emails, sat through meetings where people talked about deadlines and deliverables like the ground beneath me wasn't quietly shifting. No one there knew what I'd done, and that somehow made it worse and better at the same time. My life was unraveling in one room and completely ordinary in another. During lunch, I checked my phone. Still nothing from Marcus. Missed calls from my mom. A single message from my dad. Please call when you're free. I wasn't free, not emotionally, not yet. That evening, the calls came in waves. When I finally answered, it was because I was exhausted from holding the line alone. My mom's voice was tight, stretched thin, like she'd been crying on and off all day. "What did you do?" she asked, not accusing, not curious, just shaken. "I changed one ticket," I said calmly. "Nothing else." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Marcus apparently had discovered the cancellation when he tried to check in. According to my mom, there had been shouting, accusations, Marcus insisting it had to be a mistake, an airline agent explaining patiently that the ticket had been canceled by the purchaser, my name, my email, my card. She told me Marcus said I'd done it to humiliate him, that I'd wanted to teach him a lesson. I didn't respond right away. I was too busy noticing how even now the story was being framed around his distress, his embarrassment, his interpretation. No one asked how it felt to be erased from a trip I'd paid for. No one asked why I'd reached that point. "I wanted to go on the trip I paid for," I said finally. He told everyone I wasn't invited. I just made that true for one person. The line went quiet. Not because my mom didn't understand, but because she did and didn't want to say it out loud. The next day, my family left without Marcus. Or rather, they left knowing he wasn't coming, but still somehow acting surprised by it. I stayed home. I watched the hours pass, imagining scenes I wasn't part of. Security lines, gate announcements, my parents navigating the airport, Marcus at home pacing, spiraling, calling anyone who would listen. That night I hit my lowest point, not in a dramatic way, no tears, no shouting, just a hollow exhaustion that settled into my bones. I sat alone in my apartment with the lights off, scrolling through old messages between me and Marcus. Times I'd apologized when I hadn't done anything wrong. Times I'd offered help without being asked. Times my effort had been met with entitlement or silence. And then the thought came heavy and unavoidable. I had trained them to treat me this way. Every time I swallowed frustration, every time I said it's fine when it wasn't, every time I chose peace over honesty, I wasn't just enduring favoritism, I was participating in it. That realization hurt more than any accusation Marcus could throw at me, because it meant this wasn't just something that had happened to me, it was something I'd allowed. The days that followed were quiet in a way that felt intentional. No vacation photos, no updates. The family group chat stayed silent, like everyone was afraid to acknowledge what had happened. For the first time, I didn't rush to fill the space. I let it exist. I stopped answering every call immediately. I told my mom I needed space and didn't soften it with excuses. And something unexpected happened. Nothing collapsed. The world didn't end. My parents didn't disown me. My job didn't suffer. The only thing that disappeared was the constant background noise of obligation. Without it, I could finally hear myself think. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful at first. It was disorienting, like stepping off a moving walkway and realizing how fast you'd been going just to stay in place. For years, my life had been punctuated by constant small demands, calls. I answered immediately, favors I agreed to, without thinking, emotional messes I cleaned up before anyone else had to see them. When those stopped even temporarily, I didn't know what to do with the empty space. So I sat with it. I went to work and came home without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I cooked meals instead of grabbing whatever was fastest. I went to bed without rehearsing conversations in my head, without drafting apologies I hadn't been asked for yet. The absence of chaos felt almost suspicious, like it was waiting to punish me for not intervening. It didn't. A few days after the trip started, my dad called. His voice sounded different, less defensive, more tired. He told me Marcus had come back to stay with them, that things were tense. I imagined Marcus in my parents' house, pacing, complaining, replaying the story to anyone who would listen. I felt a flicker of guilt, sharp and familiar. Then I let it pass. I hope he's okay, I said, and I meant it. But I didn't offer to fix anything. That alone felt like crossing another invisible line. My dad hesitated. He says you've changed. I almost smiled. I think I've just stopped pretending. The next week was rough in quieter ways. The family group chat stayed silent. No one mentioned the trip. It felt intentional, like they didn't want to remind me of what I'd missed, or maybe they didn't want to admit how it had fallen apart. Either way, the silence pressed in on me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to fill it. Instead, I started doing small things for myself, things that felt almost rebellious in their simplicity. I went back to the gym, not to punish my body, but to feel present in it. I cooked real meals. I took a short solo trip over a weekend, just 2 days, no itinerary, no one to accommodate. I sat on a park bench with a coffee and watched people pass by, realizing how rarely I'd allowed myself to be still without guilt. My confidence didn't return all at once. It rebuilt quietly in moments where I chose myself, and nothing bad happened as a result. At work, I took on a project. I'd been avoiding something complex that required focus. My manager noticed, complimented me, offered me more responsibility. It felt strange being seen without having to overextend or explain myself. About a week after the trip, Marcus finally reached out, not to apologize. He sent a long message late at night about how betrayed he felt, how everyone had noticed his absence, how humiliating it had been to explain why he wasn't there. He said I'd crossed a line, that I'd damaged the family. I read the message twice, then set my phone down without responding. In the past, I would have rushed to explain myself, softened. The edges tried to make him understand. This time I felt tired, and clarity has a way of making old arguments feel unnecessary. A few days later, my dad called again. He sounded worn down. He's staying with us for now, he said. Things have been tense. I imagined the familiar pattern unfolding, my parents absorbing the fallout, Marcus positioning himself as the injured party, everyone quietly hoping I'd step back in to restore balance. The urge to do that tugged at me, reflexive and strong. Has he apologized? I asked instead. There was a long pause. No, my dad admitted. Then I'm not discussing anything yet, I said gently. I need that first. That boundary landed harder than any argument I'd ever had with them. My dad didn't know how to respond. He'd spent years navigating around Marcus's behavior. He didn't know what to do when I refused to play along. A week later, my mom called with a different request. Marcus wanted to stay with me for a while, just until things cooled down. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the assumption behind the ask. They weren't asking because it was fair. They were asking because they believed I'd say yes. No, I said calmly, I'm not his reset button. The words hung in the air between us. My mom didn't argue. She didn't plead. She just went quiet, and I knew she understood that something fundamental had shifted. That night, Marcus sent me a voice message. I let it sit unopened for hours. When I finally listened, his voice was trembling, not with remorse, but with barely contained anger. He accused me of turning everyone against him, of enjoying his discomfort, of punishing him for needing space. Not once did he acknowledge the lie. Not once did he say he was sorry. When the message ended, I felt nothing. No anger, no guilt, just certainty. For the first time, I wasn't questioning my memory or wondering if I'd misunderstood something. I knew exactly what had happened, and I was done arguing with a version of reality that only existed to protect someone else. The message came from a number I didn't recognize. It was short and direct, the kind of text that immediately sets your nerves on edge. "Hi, Evelyn, this is Claire. I'm Marcus's friend. He asked me to reach out. There's something you should know about what he's been telling people about the trip." I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. My first instinct was the old one to jump in to manage the situation before it spiraled to contain whatever mess was forming. I felt that familiar pull in my chest, the urge to fix something that wasn't mine to fix. Instead, I put the phone face down on my desk and finished my workday. That alone felt like progress. When I finally replied, it was hours later. All I wrote was, "What do you think I should know?" Her response came almost immediately, like she'd been waiting. She told me Marcus's story had changed multiple times. First, he'd said I canceled his ticket by accident. Then he said I panicked and did it on purpose because I was jealous of how close he was to our parents. Then he claimed I'd offered to pay him back, but he'd refused because it was about principles. None of it sounded right. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not shock, confirmation. Claire and I talked on the phone that night. She sounded hesitant at first, unsure where she stood, but the longer we spoke, the more pieces fell into place. Marcus hadn't just rewritten the story for our family. He'd rewritten it everywhere. Friends, extended relatives, coworkers, anyone who would listen. According to him, I'd dangled the vacation as a way to control everyone, then snapped when he pushed back. I was manipulative, unstable, petty. He was the victim of my ego. "What made you reach out?" I asked. She exhaled slowly. "Because he asked me to back him up. He wanted me to tell your parents you admitted it was revenge. And you never said anything like that. I was there when you announced the trip. You were excited, proud. This didn't add up." After we hung up, I sat in the dark and let it sink in. For the first time, I wasn't questioning my memory or wondering if I'd missed something. I knew exactly what had happened, and now finally someone else did too. Over the next few days, more cracks appeared. My cousin called cautious. "Did you know Marcus told Aunt Linda you kicked him out of the vacation because he embarrassed you?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I'm not surprised." A day later, my younger aunt messaged me. Then my brother-in-law. Each conversation revealed a slightly different version of the same story tailored to whoever was listening. There was no truth, just whatever narrative protected Marcus in the moment. And for the first time, I realized how fragile that made his position. Lies require constant maintenance. The truth doesn't. I didn't confront him. I didn't correct anyone publicly. I didn't post my side online or call an emergency family meeting. Instead, I started documenting everything. Screenshots, dates, times, messages, voicemails. I saved the airline confirmation showing exactly which ticket I'd canceled and when. I pulled up the original itinerary emails where Marcus had thanked me for booking everything. I saved Claire's messages with her permission. I even wrote down my own recollections while they were still fresh. It felt strange doing this quietly and methodically, not like revenge, more like preparation. Meanwhile, Marcus's situation deteriorated. Living back at my parents' house didn't suit him. He complained about the lack of space, about their rules, about how judged he felt. He told anyone who would listen that he was basically homeless now that I'd ruined his stability. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so exhausting. My mom started calling more frequently, her tone oscillating between defensive and pleading. "He's really struggling," she said one afternoon. "He feels like everyone's turned against him." "Has he apologized?" I asked. There was a long pause. "No," she admitted. "Then I'm not discussing anything," I said calmly. A week later, my dad called with a familiar request. Marcus wanted to stay with me for a while, just until things cooled down. I didn't hesitate this time. "No," I said, "I'm not his safety net." That night, Marcus finally broke his silence again. He sent a voice message. I didn't open it right away. When I did, his voice was shaking, not with remorse, but with anger barely held in check. He accused me of turning people against him, of enjoying the chaos of punishing him for needing space. Not once did he acknowledge the lie. When the message ended, I felt something solidify inside me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would happen if I stopped protecting him from it. The invitation came from my parents a few days later, framed carefully like everything always was when emotions were involved. A family dinner. Everyone there. A chance to clear the air. I almost declined. Almost. A month ago, I would have agreed without hesitation, already rehearsing how I'd keep things calm, how I'd absorb the discomfort so no one else had to. This time I paused long enough to ask myself a question I'd never asked before. Do I want resolution or do I want truth? I agreed to go. Before the dinner, Claire called me again. She sounded nervous. He's planning to confront you, she said. He thinks if he does it in front of everyone, you'll back down. I thanked her and hung up, then opened the folder on my computer where I'd been quietly collecting everything. Screenshots, emails, timelines, airline confirmations, message threads. I didn't know exactly how the night would unfold, but for the first time, I wasn't walking into it unprepared. When I arrived at my parents' house, the living room was already full. My mom and dad sat on the couch. My cousin leaned against the wall. An aunt sat at the dining table. Marcus stood near the window, with his arms crossed, like he was guarding territory. He didn't wait for anyone to speak. "There she is," he said loudly. "The mastermind." No one laughed. That alone threw him off. "I think we should talk like adults," my dad said, already sounding exhausted. Marcus turned toward him immediately. "I've been trying to talk. She's the one who won't answer my calls. She canceled my ticket on purpose." Then he looked at me, eyes sharp. "You humiliated me." I met his gaze without flinching. "I canceled one ticket," I said evenly. "The one belonging to the person who told everyone I wasn't invited to a trip I paid for." His mouth opened, then closed. "That's not what happened," he said quickly. "You said you didn't want to come. You were stressed. Everyone heard you." I glanced around the room. Did anyone here hear me say that? Silence. He scoffed. "So now everyone's pretending." I took a breath, not to steady myself. I already was, but to slow the moment down. "I didn't come here to argue about feelings," I said. "I came to clear up facts." He rolled his eyes. "Here we go." I set my phone on the coffee table between us, screen facing up. "This is the itinerary email I sent," I said, scrolling. You replied, "Thanks for booking everything." You never said I wasn't coming. You never said I agreed to step aside. His jaw tightened. "This," I continued, "is the airline confirmation. It shows exactly which ticket I canceled and when. No one else's plans were affected." My mom leaned forward, peering at the screen. "And this," I said, turning the phone slightly, "is the message you sent Claire asking her to tell Mom I admitted canceling the ticket out of jealousy." Claire shifted in her seat. "You did ask me that," she said quietly. "I didn't agree to lie." Marcus snapped toward her. "You said you'd help me." "I said I'd listen," she replied. The room felt different now, heavier focused. I kept going. "You also told Mom I offered to pay you back." "I never did. And you told me in writing, if you care about this family, you'll stay home." That message is still on my phone. "That's out of context," Marcus shot back. "Then give the context," I said calmly. "Because this is the full thread." He opened his mouth, then stopped. For the first time that night, uncertainty flickered across his face. "I want to be clear," I said, turning to everyone. "I didn't cancel his ticket to punish him. I canceled it because he told people I wasn't invited. He made that decision for me. I simply accepted it and applied it to the person who made it." "That's twisted," Marcus said, his voice rising. "You did this to hurt me." "I did this to stop being erased," I replied. "There's a difference." My dad rubbed his temples. "Marcus," he said slowly, "did you tell people Evelyn uninvited herself?" Marcus hesitated. "Just a beat too long. I said she didn't want to come," he muttered. "That's not what you told me," my cousin said. "You said she backed out because you needed space. And you told me she promised to send you the money," my mom added quietly. The room went still. Marcus laughed, brittle and sharp. "So what? Now I'm the villain." "No," I said. "You're just not the victim." That was when he broke. Tears came fast and loud, accusations spilling out about how no one supported him, how I'd always resented him, how unfair it was that everyone was questioning him now. He accused me of planning this, of setting a trap, of turning the family against him. I let him talk. When he finally ran out of steam, I stood up. "I didn't plan revenge," I said. "I planned boundaries. Everything that happened after that came from your choices." I picked up my phone and headed for the door. "Wait," my mom said softly. "What do you want us to do?" I turned back. "I want honesty, and I want accountability. Not excuses made for him. Apologies made by him." Marcus stared at me stunned. "You're abandoning me." I met his eyes. "No, I'm just not carrying you anymore." I left without another word, my heart steady in a way it had never been before. The fallout didn't come all at once. It spread slowly, quietly, the way truth often does when it's been buried under years of convenience. Marcus couldn't stay at my parents' house after that night. Not because anyone formally asked him to leave, but because the tension had become unbearable. The lies were too exposed, the questions too direct, There was no version of the story left where he could still be both innocent and misunderstood. He moved between friends for a while, couch to couch, retelling the situation with less confidence each time. Stories only work when people believe them, and his had worn thin. Every retelling required more explanations, more edits, more justifications. Meanwhile, mine stayed the same, calm, boring even, and people noticed. My parents changed slowly, awkwardly. There were no dramatic apologies at first, no sudden awakenings, just small shifts. My mom stopped defending Marcus automatically. She started asking questions she'd avoided for years. My dad admitted one quiet afternoon that he'd taken the easier path too often, that keeping the peace had felt safer than confronting the truth. He didn't excuse it. He named it. That mattered. My relationship with my parents didn't magically heal, but it recalibrated. There were boundaries now, clear ones. I didn't answer every call immediately. I didn't step in to manage their discomfort. And when they tested those boundaries, as they sometimes did, I held them. Each time the world stayed intact. My cousin told me later that night had changed the way everyone saw things. Not because I'd exposed Marcus, but because I hadn't attacked him either. I'd simply stopped protecting him from consequences. That distinction lingered. Weeks passed. The tension didn't disappear, but it settled into something manageable. My brother and I grew closer, bonded by the quiet realization that we'd both been navigating the same storm from different sides. He admitted he'd always assumed I was fine because I never complained. I told him I'd learned the hard way that silence teaches people what they can get away with. Then one evening, Marcus finally texted me. No theatrics, no accusations, just a few lines. I shouldn't have lied. I'm sorry. I read it once, then again. I accepted the apology. I didn't argue. I didn't revisit the past. And I didn't invite him back into the role he'd lost. Accountability doesn't always come with reconciliation. Sometimes it just comes with closure. What surprised me most wasn't how much my family changed, but how much lighter my life felt without constantly proving my worth. I didn't get louder. I didn't harden. I didn't become someone unrecognizable. I just stopped canceling myself for other people's comfort. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. Others mistake silence for consent. I learned the difference the moment I chose myself and didn't apologize for it, and I haven't looked back.